We've been told for years to eat healthy to protect our heart, our weight, our energy. But what about our brain? Especially as we age, most people focus on things like memory games, crossword puzzles, or supplements. And while those may help a little, there's something far more powerful and often overlooked: food. The truth is, the food we put in our bodies every single day can either preserve our brain health or destroy it faster than we realize. For seniors in particular, that choice becomes even more critical. The aging brain is more vulnerable, more sensitive, and more reactive to the damage caused by what we eat. Now, I know it's easy to think Alzheimer's is just genetic, that it's something that either runs in the family or doesn't. But new science says otherwise. We now know that lifestyle, and especially diet, can heavily influence whether those genes get activated or stay silent. And when I say diet, I don't mean some extreme cleanse or cutting out everything you enjoy. I mean becoming aware of which specific foods are acting like slow poison for your brain. The first thing I want you to understand is that there's a direct connection between what you eat and how your brain functions, not just years from now, but today, tomorrow, and every day after. Certain foods trigger inflammation in the brain. That inflammation doesn't always show up in a way you notice right away. It's not like a swollen ankle. Brain inflammation is subtle. It starts as a little fogginess, maybe forgetting where you put your keys more often, struggling to find the right word, feeling slower to react, or even just being more tired mentally. But that fog builds, and over time, it can harden into something far more serious: cognitive decline, memory loss, and eventually, Alzheimer's. That's how it happens, slowly, silently, and we don't even realize we're feeding it with every bite. One of the key mechanisms behind this is oxidative stress. Think of your brain like a high-performance machine. It needs clean fuel, but when we eat foods that are processed, full of added sugars, industrial oils, or artificial ingredients, we're flooding that machine with garbage. It creates free radicals, tiny, destructive molecules, that bounce around inside our cells and damage our neurons. Oxidative stress is like rust on metal. It corrodes, it weakens, it breaks things down. And neurons, the cells in your brain that are responsible for everything from memory to movement, are especially vulnerable. Another issue is insulin resistance. Most people only associate insulin with diabetes, but here's something most seniors have never been told. Your brain needs insulin to function properly too. When we eat a diet high in refined sugars and starches, it creates a condition in the brain often referred to as type 3 diabetes. That's right, scientists now call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes because of how closely linked it is to insulin resistance in the brain. When your brain becomes less responsive to insulin, neurons can't get the fuel they need, and they start to shut down. It's like trying to run a car without gas. It sputters, it stalls, and eventually it dies. Now add chronic inflammation and oxidative stress to that picture, and you've got a storm brewing in the brain. And it's being fed, day after day, by what's on our plate. I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying this to empower you. Because this is actually good news. It means you're not helpless. It means Alzheimer's is not just about bad luck or bad genes. It's about daily choices, and the most powerful of those choices is what you decide to eat or not eat today. And here's the thing: many of the foods that are triggering these harmful effects are things people have been eating for decades, thinking they're harmless. Some even sound healthy, but that's why this message is urgent. Seniors, especially, are being targeted by food industries that prioritize shelf life over brain life. You deserve to know the truth. Because once you understand how food interacts with your brain, how it can either be the fuel that helps you stay sharp or the toxin that speeds up decline, you can take back control. You can protect your mind, your memory, your clarity. It all starts with awareness. And in the next part of this talk, we'll break down the worst offenders, the specific foods that are robbing you of mental sharpness and putting your long-term cognitive health at serious risk. You need to know what they are and why they must be avoided immediately. Let's talk about something that most people completely underestimate when it comes to brain health: sugar. Not just the sugar you sprinkle on your cereal or stir into your tea, but the hidden sugars, the refined carbohydrates, the so-called comfort foods, that flood your bloodstream with glucose and, in the process, quietly wreak havoc on your brain. Now, we often hear about sugar in the context of weight gain, diabetes, maybe even heart disease. But hardly anyone talks about what it's doing to your brain, especially as you get older, and that's a big problem, because sugar isn't just making us tired or foggy. It's one of the fastest ways to accelerate cognitive decline and raise your risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Here's how it works. When you consume sugar, especially in large amounts or in refined forms, your blood glucose spikes. Your body reacts by releasing insulin to bring that level down. But over time, if this happens repeatedly, which it does for most people eating a modern diet, your cells become less sensitive to insulin. That's insulin resistance, and it doesn't just happen in the body, it happens in the brain. Your neurons need insulin to take in glucose, which is their primary source of energy. If they can't get that energy because insulin isn't working properly anymore, they begin to malfunction. Communication between brain cells slows, memory retrieval starts to lag, focus drops, you're seeing the early signs of cognitive decline, and it's being driven by too much sugar. What makes this even more dangerous is that sugar doesn't work alone. It interacts with inflammation and oxidative stress like fuel to a fire. When you eat sugar, it leads to the production of advanced glycation end products, appropriately nicknamed AG. These compounds damage tissues, including brain tissues, by creating stiffness in cells and blood vessels, which restricts blood flow and nutrient delivery. That means your brain isn't just starved of fuel, it's also being attacked at the structural level. Over time, this leads to neuron damage and, eventually, neuron death. And we're not just talking about candy bars or soda here. It's the so-called healthy foods that are just as much of a problem. Fruit juices with no fiber, flavored yogurts packed with sweeteners, breakfast cereals that say whole grain on the box but spike your blood sugar like a dessert, white bread, pasta, even some granola bars. All of these rapidly convert into glucose in your system and set off the same dangerous cascade in your brain. Now, if you're over 50, the impact of sugar becomes even more serious. As we age, our body's ability to handle glucose efficiently declines. That means the same slice of cake or soft drink you might have tolerated in your 30s becomes far more damaging in your 60s or 70s. This is why we see so many seniors struggling with memory issues, with confusion, with what feels like natural aging, but it's not always just aging. Often, it's the result of a high-sugar diet that's been quietly breaking down the brain over time. But here's the thing that really shocked me when I started digging into the research. Alzheimer's is increasingly being referred to as type 3 diabetes. That term alone should make us pause. It means the same dysfunction in insulin and glucose metabolism that causes type 2 diabetes in the body is also happening in the brain, and it's directly tied to sugar consumption. We're looking at a condition that doesn't just affect your waistline or your blood work. It affects your identity, your independence, your memories, your relationships. Sugar is not just sweet, it's a cognitive risk factor, and yet most people don't know this. They're trying to eat better. But they're still trapped in a food environment that pushes sugar at every turn. It's added to sauces, to soups, to snacks, to drinks. And every time you consume it, you're triggering micro damage in your brain that adds up over time. That's why it's so important to raise awareness, not to create fear, but to create agency. Once you understand what sugar is doing behind the scenes, you're no longer a passive victim of cognitive decline. You can actually do something about it. Cutting down sugar isn't about being extreme or living on lettuce leaves. It's about being conscious. It's about choosing foods that keep your insulin stable, your inflammation low, and your neurons firing cleanly. That shift alone, just lowering sugar intake, can dramatically improve your mental clarity, memory, and long-term brain resilience. So if you're serious about protecting your mind as you age, if you want to stay sharp and focused well into your 70s, 80s, and beyond, it starts here. Start looking at labels. Start cutting the sugar. Your brain will thank you every single day you do. If you really want to understand how Alzheimer's creeps in, not just through sugar but through everyday habits, we need to talk about toxic fats and processed foods. Because what we're dealing with here isn't just a matter of eating too much, it's about eating the wrong kinds of things that silently damage your brain. For many seniors, meals are often about convenience, microwavable dinners, canned soups, quick snacks. But those easy options often contain some of the most dangerous substances for the brain: trans fats, hydrogenated oils, and ultra-processed ingredients that are scientifically proven to impair cognitive function. Let's break it down. Trans fats were originally designed to increase shelf life. They're artificial fats created by pumping hydrogen into vegetable oils. They make food last longer on the shelf, and they give that crispy, flaky texture to things like pastries, chips, and fried foods. But your brain doesn't care about texture or shelf life. It cares about function, flexibility, and communication between cells. And trans fats directly interfere with all of that. When you eat them, they get incorporated into your brain cells, literally changing the way your neurons are built. That's not just bad, it's dangerous. Your brain is made up of nearly 60% fat. So when the fats you're consuming are toxic or artificial, you're essentially corrupting the very building blocks your brain is made from. Think of it like building a house with rotting wood. It might stand up for a little while, but eventually it starts to sag, to crumble, to collapse. That's what happens at the microscopic level when these fats get incorporated into your neurons. It slows communication, disrupts synapses, and makes your brain more vulnerable to inflammation and degeneration. And here's where the picture gets even more concerning. Trans fats don't just interfere with structure. They also increase levels of LDL cholesterol and inflammation in the bloodstream, which impairs blood flow to the brain. Your brain needs a constant, rich supply of oxygen and nutrients to function properly. If your blood vessels are clogged or inflamed, that flow gets disrupted. It's like putting a kink in a garden hose. You're starving the flowers, in this case the neurons, of what they need to survive. Now let's look at ultra-processed foods. These are the packaged, pre-made flavor, enhanced products that dominate grocery store shelves. They're cheap, they're convenient, and they're heavily marketed to seniors as easy time-saving options. But they're loaded with preservatives, artificial flavors, emulsifiers, and colorings that do nothing for your health, and everything to promote disease. These additives can alter the gut microbiome, which we now know is deeply connected to brain health. They can also create low-grade systemic inflammation that reaches the brain through the bloodstream. Over time, this inflammation impairs the blood-brain barrier, allowing toxins to enter and do damage that accumulates silently for years. Processed meats like bacon, sausages, deli cuts are particularly harmful. They often contain nitrates and nitrites, which have been linked to neurodegeneration. Studies are now showing that regular consumption of these meats can increase the risk of dementia by as much as 44%. That's not a small number, and yet people continue eating them because it's what they grew up on, what's easy, what tastes familiar. But the cost of that comfort is far too high. Even cooking methods matter. When you deep fry foods in reused oils like many fast food places do, it creates compounds called acrylamides and aldehydes. These are neurotoxic substances. They damage DNA, impair brain function, and have been associated with accelerated brain aging. So it's not just what you eat, but how it's prepared. That burger, that box of fries, that store-bought pie, it might taste good for a few minutes, but what it's doing inside your brain is irreversible over time. The problem is, many of these toxic fats and processed ingredients don't make you feel sick right away. You eat them, you move on with your day, and you don't realize that slowly, week by week, month by month, your brain is functioning a little less efficiently. You start forgetting small things, losing track of conversations, struggling to focus. Most people chalk it up to aging. But in many cases, it's not just aging, it's diet-driven cognitive decline, Now the good news is this damage isn't always permanent. The brain is remarkably resilient when you give it the right fuel. If you start replacing those processed oils with healthy fat, like those from nuts, seeds, avocados, and olive oil, you start to rebuild that foundation. You improve communication between neurons, you reduce inflammation, you restore clarity and energy. But it starts with removing what's doing the damage. That means reading labels, cooking more at home, and questioning the foods we've taken for granted as normal for far too long. Your brain deserves better than what these processed foods are offering, and the longer you keep consuming them, the more you're gambling with your memory, your awareness, and your independence. So if there's one thing to remember, it's this. Eliminate the toxic fats, and you give your brain the chance to function at its best, not just today, but for years to come. By now, we've talked about how diet plays a massive role in brain health, how sugar, toxic fats, and processed foods can slowly chip away at your cognitive abilities without you even realizing it. But let's get specific, because the truth is, there are certain foods, 5 in particular, that research continues to link directly to increased Alzheimer's risk. These aren't obscure or exotic ingredients. These are common everyday items found in kitchens and grocery stores across the country. They've been normalized in our diets for decades, especially for seniors who often rely on convenience and familiarity. But these 5 foods are not neutral. They are active contributors to cognitive decline, and if you want to protect your memory, your independence, and your long-term brain function, they need to be removed, starting today. The first one is margarine. It was once marketed as a healthy alternative to butter, and for years people believed they were making the right choice. But margarine is often loaded with trans fats, those artificial, hydrogenated oils we talked about earlier. These fats get embedded into your brain cell membranes, interfering with neuron communication and increasing inflammation in the brain. The damage doesn't happen in a dramatic way, it's slow and cumulative. You don't feel it the first time you spread it on toast, but after years of consistent use, it adds up. Switching to real, unprocessed fats like organic butter or olive oil can make a massive difference for brain function. The second food is white bread. It may seem harmless, even comforting, but it breaks down almost instantly into glucose in the body. White bread spikes blood sugar just like candy does, and with that spike comes insulin resistance, oxidative stress, and inflammation, all of which directly contribute to Alzheimer's pathology. The more refined and processed the carbohydrate, the more rapidly it turns into sugar in your bloodstream, creating the same cascade of damage we discussed earlier. This also includes things like white rice and regular pasta. Instead, opt for slowed, digesting, fiber-rich whole grains that help stabilize blood sugar and support brain metabolism. Third on the list is processed meats, things like bacon, sausages, deli slices, and hot dogs. These are staples in many households, but they're filled with preservatives, nitrates, and nitrites that have been shown to be neurotoxic. When you eat these foods regularly, you're not just harming your heart or your digestive system, you're increasing your risk of developing dementia. Several long-term studies have confirmed a strong link between high consumption of processed meats and accelerated cognitive decline. And it's not just the meat itself, it's how it's cooked. Frying or grilling these meats at high heat creates compounds that further damage neurons and impair memory over time. The fourth food is sugary drinks. That includes soda, fruit juices with added sugar, sweetened teas, and those so-called healthy vitamin waters. These drinks deliver a concentrated blast of sugar straight to your bloodstream, with no fiber to slow it down. And when sugar enters the system that quickly, it overwhelms your brain's insulin receptors. Regular consumption of sugary beverages has been linked to reduced brain volume and poorer memory performance in adults over 50. It's also been connected to a higher accumulation of beta-amyloid plaques, which are a hallmark sign of Alzheimer's disease. Replace these drinks with filtered water, herbal teas, or even fruit-infused water that gives you flavor without the sugar spike. And finally, the fifth food, artificial sweeteners. This one surprises people because it's often used as a sugar substitute, supposedly to cut calories and eat healthy. But artificial sweeteners like aspartame and sucralose can disrupt the gut-brain connection and interfere with neurotransmitter balance. They've been shown to negatively affect learning, memory, and mood. And even though they don't raise blood sugar directly, they still condition your brain to crave sweetness, keeping you stuck in the same addictive feedback loop. Your brain thrives on balance, not artificial stimulation. Stevia or monk fruit in moderation are better alternatives if you need something sweet now and then. So there they are. 5 foods that seem ordinary but are anything but harmless. Margarine, white bread, processed meats, sugary drinks, and artificial sweeteners. They are quietly fueling the rise of cognitive decline, especially in seniors who are more vulnerable to their effects. If you're consuming even a few of these regularly, your brain is under attack, whether you feel it yet or not. The brain doesn't sound an alarm when it's being damaged. It simply gets slower, foggier, more forgetful. But the power to stop that damage is in your hands, and it starts by removing what harms and replacing it with what heals. That's the path to staying sharp, focused, and mentally strong for years to come.